All right, good morning everyone from me. My name is Gregor Martynus. I'm a co-founder and engineer at Neighbourhoodie software. We are involved with projects like Hoodie, Apache HAUPTVERSIONSNUMM. We started the offline first movement, and we're co-hosting JSConf EU in Berlin. If you haven't been, you gotta come. It's really cool. And we're also behind projects that I will talk about today, which are Semantic Release and Greenkeeper. And it is very much my privilege to be here today, to be invited to speak at Node Interactive. It's my first time at this event, my first time in Canada, so I'm very humbled. And I thank you all very much for coming to my talk today about developer tool automation. Or about how we want to kill all humans. So I'm sorry, and also my friend and co-founder Jan is very sorry. He was supposed to be here today, and I think many of you know him. He couldn't make it. He sends his warm regards, and I will do my very best to give this talk in his place. So Jan and I, we started an open source project a while ago, which is called Hoodie, which is an open source JavaScript backend for offline first applications, which doesn't matter for this talk at all. Like, this is not a talk about Hoodie, but about the things that we learned while we're working on Hoodie, the code-based, and Hoodie, the open source community, and how we managed to scale the JavaScript development. When we started out Hoodie, it had basically two parts. These were two repositories. The server part, which Jan did because he's the database backend guy, and I did the client for it. And it worked out pretty well. So we found a few more contributors, and we continued working on it. The problem that we run into, though, over time is that Hoodie is a pretty complex project, and the barrier of entry to new contributors, and the barrier of entry even to ourselves, once we left the code base, for 3 weeks and come back, became very, very high. So we are thinking about how we can reduce the barrier for new contributors to enter the project, and also the barrier to retain them. So what we ended up is we split up the code base into smaller chunks. So 2 repositories became 4, and 4 repositories, 8, and 8 repositories became 12. And in fact, Hoodie is like 30-ish separate modules today. And that worked out pretty great in terms of what our highest priority was, meaning to onboarding new contributors. And if you squeeze your eyes very much, then you will see Kim Creighton there, who was speaking yesterday, and Jenna, I think you are there too. So that worked out very well for us because of the reduced scope. Someone has to learn who wants to contribute to this code base. And I mean, the same is true for closed source software as well when you onboard new team members. And the reason for this is when you have smaller scope modules, it's much easier to document only that scope. It's much easier to test. And as I mentioned before, it's much easier to contribute to, not only to the outside contributors, but also to yourself after you left for a while. So from our own experience, we can definitely say that modularization helps with attracting contributors and retaining contributors. But not everything is rainbows and unicorns, of course, because the increased modularization reduced the maintainability of the project. Because we had 3-4 levels of dependencies, and if our Hoodie server API module had a breaking change, then we had to release the package, and then we had to update all the intermediate packages and release them again until we come up to the top level Hoodie packages that people actually depended on, and release that, and that's when the fix that they maybe contributed finally made it to the NPM registry so that they could take advantage of it. So needless to say, this is a very repetitive and a very error-prone process, but we still want to hold on to our modularization because it worked out so well, and frankly, I think this is what nodes and NPM superpower is. So we looked into how we could mitigate the challenges that we have been facing working on Hoodie. So what we started to looking at is releases and updates and how we can remove humans from the equation. So this talk goes in two parts, and the first one will be about the releasing. And this is the part where you will learn how you can manage hundreds of NPM packages like Kenzie Dots, who's a big fan of semantic release. So the learnings that we made while working on Hoodie, but they are pretty much applicable to most NPM and Node projects, is that Node and modularization are a perfect fit, and we should embrace it. We had to learn about semantic versioning, what it means not only for a single package, but the entire ecosystem. And we had to search our feelings about versioning. So modularization, I mean, boy, do we love modularization in Node.js, right? It's arguably the ease of creating reusable bits of code and publishing it to like a common registry, which led to the success and continuous success of Node.js and like the other. I mean, this is what distinguishes us from other language communities. And what is really nice is maybe the reason why this is working so well is that publishing an NPM package is just like a single command. It is very easy. And if you haven't published an NPM package, but you use the same code in more than one package, I ask you to try it out. It's really fascinating how easy it is. It's a big shout out to NPM. Semantic versioning. When you see a semantic version, you oftentimes see this X, Y, Z. And these are 3 integer numbers. This is not a float number. The dots are just separators. And there's a specification on it that you can see on semver.org, which defines what these numbers are. They are defined as major, minor, and patch. And it is important to understand when you have to increase which number. So whenever you have an incompatible API change, meaning you removed an API that was there before, or you changed an existing API, you have to bump the major version number. When you add functionality, you bump the minor version number, and for bug fixes, you bump the patch number. And this is very critical to understand how important this is for Node. Because like all version numbers in the NPM registry are semantic versions. And all these semantic versions are basically contracts between the package and all the other apps and packages that depend on it. And Isaac, CEO of NPM, famously said that basically NPM is a very big bet on semantic versioning. So if we don't follow it, we basically break the ecosystem, so we shouldn't do that. By default, when we install new dependencies to our projects, they are installed with this little hat that I like to call the NPM hat trick. And what it means is, at the example for async, when you have a version 2.00 and it's prefixed with this little hat, it means that it will automatically install all new versions that have higher numbers in the patch and the minor version, but it will not install a version 3.00 or higher. Now, one problem that we have, or that we found others have with the naming of these version numbers is when we say major release or minor release, it is something that sounds very much like marketing. And we can discuss what a major release and what a minor release is. So we suggest not to call them that way, and instead call them breaking, feature, and fix. Because then it's just very clear. Do I break something? Yes or no? And there is no discussion about it. At least there is less discussion about it. And version numbers are for computers. They're not for humans. And if you take anything away from this talk today, make it this. Just take out humans of the equation, of the decision what the next version number will be. And there is something that is very common, and I understand, because I've been there. We all fear to increase the version number. But trust me, it hurts quite a bit the first time, when you release the version 2.0. But once you're at 21, it will be okay. You kind of, I think Hoodie is at 26, and it's fine. And because the Germans famously have a word for everything, we call it the HAUPTVERSIONSNUMM ERNERHÖHUNGSANGst, of course, which is easier to remember. And it's also the reason why Germans don't understand the discussion about character limits in Twitter. Or to make it better, HAUPTVERSIONSNUMMERnerhöhungsangst is the fear of increasing the breaking version number. All right, so now we're on the same level. Quick recap. Modularization, fuck yeah, heck yeah. NPM versions are contracts, and break versions, not code, and take humans out of the equation. All right, let's go through a common workflow on GitHub when we receive a pull request. So I created this amazing funky sloth 42 package which generates random strings. And someone sent me a pull request which adds support to pass in a number, and then it returns an array. So it's not a breaking change, it is a new feature. So what I do, I check out the pull request, and I look for the documentation. I look if they added the documentation and for the tests, and I check if the CI is green, and if it is, then I am merging this contribution. So far, so normal, right? Now what's next? And this is the part we accepted the contribution, and now the people are like eagerly, okay, when is this released, when is this released, when is this released? So you have to go in, you have to pull the changes, you have to run npm publish. But you also have to create a git tag to keep your GitHub repository and the npm registry in sync, and you have to do the correct tag. And you have to push the tags. And you have to commit the package JSON. And you have to make sure that you pick the right version number. And you have to create changelogs if you're nice, and you should. And this is a repetitive process. This is what you do for every single release. And I think that humans shouldn't do this, because all we care about is to build cool things and don't break stuff, especially Node. So enter semantic release. This is how you set it up. When you have Node 8, you just run npx semantic release CLI setup in your folder of your repository, and then just follow the instructions, and it will set up the CI and the npm magicness. And the way it works is, once you accept the pull request, and here I just changed the commit message. I'll get back to this in a second. So once I accept the pull request, it will trigger a CI build on the main branch, which will then wait for the test to succeed. It will calculate the version number and publish it to npm. It will create a git tag and a GitHub release, and it will put all the change logs that it calculates from the commit messages on GitHub. And this is all without any human intervention. So the only thing you have to learn for semantic release are 3 conventions about commits. When you commit a change that has a fix, then you have to prefix the subject with a fix colon. For a feature, you use feat. And when you have breaking changes, then for each breaking change in the commit, you use breaking change in caps. And then describe the breaking change, because as you have seen, all these changes show up in the release notes later. So this is where you show, this is how it worked before, this is how it works now, and this is how you migrate. And you just do it in a commit, and everything will happen automatically. And these are just the defaults you can configure this the way you want. All right, so that was part one. Build cool things, don't break stuff, and check it out on semanticrelease.org. Part two. This is the part where you learn to manage your NPM packages like Michael Rogers himself. When researching dependency management, we found that there are really two things that we care about the most. For one, we want to have bug fixes and security updates in our code as fast as possible. And the second one, we don't want our code to just randomly break, right? And this is, I think, something that we've all experienced. We just left our code, we come back, we didn't change a single line of code. We just update the install the dependencies or set up the repository afresh, and now it doesn't work anymore, and we don't know why. And it's really, really annoying. And like log files now with NPM 5 and Yarn kind of help to mitigate the problem, but this is only for local development. Like these log files do not make it into the registry, so people depending on your code will still get the other versions, and it will break for them, which makes it arguably even worse. So when we look at a common like package.json file, like there are like 20-ish dependencies here. And when I get back to this code and I can run npm outdated, and I see npm outdated will show me these are the versions that you have, these are the latest versions that are out there, and then I have to go for every one of these packages to find out what are the changes and will these changes affect me. So I go to the GitHub repository and I look for the change logs if there are any. If not, I go to the commit messages. And then update the version in my package.json, install it, run the tests, and then do it over and over again. And there are some other tools that help with that, or like you just update everything at once, but then when it breaks, you don't know which of the updates broke your tests. So yeah, this is not fun. And one big reason to stay up to date with the latest breaking versions is that usually only the latest breaking versions are the ones who receive bug fixes and security fixes. Like Node.js does an amazing job with Node LTS, and like they backport all these bugs and bug fixes and security fixes and improvements back to the LTS versions. But to be honest, like us little NPM package owners, we don't do that. Like I release 2 and then 3, 4.0, and if there is a bug, I release 4.01. I don't backport it to all the others. Like I can't do that. So we have to keep our dependencies up to date. And the only way to keep these dependencies up to date is to actually schedule it, right? Make it part of our process. Because if we don't make it part of our process, then it will never happen. And the reality is, while we do it for some, we mostly don't do that. So, and this is where Greenkeeper comes in. Greenkeeper is a GitHub application, so you can just go to greenkeeper.io and click the big green button. It just redirects you to GitHub Apps Greenkeeper, where you can install it, select a repository, and you are done. You basically have installed Greenkeeper now on your repository. Now let's say we released a new breaking version for our funky sloth 42 package, because we go all YOLO and drop support for Node, all versions below Node 8, because why not? Don't do this yet. It is just to showcase that right now. So as soon as the version 2.0.0 gets released to the NPM registry, or my funky app, which depends on funky sloth 42, will get a pull request by Greenkeeper informing us that there is a new version. And it will show us like a summary, the current version that we have, a new version that it is, what kind of dependency it is. It will show us the release nodes, if there are release nodes on GitHub. It will show us the commits for this release, and there is a link for the full diff as well if you want to check that out. And Greenkeeper itself follows the commit conventions from semantic release. So when you merge this, it will actually release a fixed version, which helps with deduping. Like, this is how we can avoid to have 17 versions of Lodash in our node modules folder. So this is the automatic dependency updates that you get with Greenkeeper. So you don't have to make it part of your manual process or schedule, because Greenkeeper will just send you pull requests whenever there are breaking changes, or wherever there are releases which are outside of the defined range of the dependencies in your package.json file. Now the second part, randomly broken apps and packages. When you have like 20-ish dependencies in your package.json, then earlier or later, probably most of them will release a version which is within your range, but will break your code. Like, this happens all the time. People don't do it, on purpose. It just happens. And one way to address it is you just remove the head, right? You just like pin your versions. But boy, will Greenkeeper keep you busy if you remove that, because if you remove that, then every version is out of your range, and Greenkeeper will send pull requests for every update that there is. And I think Selo told me the numbers, there are like 10,000 updates per day. Yeah, and 9,000 are version updates, and 1,000 are new packages. So there is a lot of going on in the NPM registry. Besides, this is just breaking the ecosystem. You can do this for apps. Don't do this for packages where others depend on you. And you don't have to, because Greenkeeper helps you to mitigate the problem of randomly broken applications and packages. And what it does is, when a new version gets released, which is within the range that you have defined, it will not send a pull request, but it will create a branch. And we don't get notifications about branches on GitHub, right? But the new branch will trigger a CI build on Travis, which means it will run your tests. And once the tests finish, Greenkeeper will know, did your tests pass or not? If they are green, it means the new version didn't cause any problem, and we can just delete the branch, and you will never know that Greenkeeper was even there. But if there was a breaking change, or if your tests failed with the new version within your range, then Greenkeeper will create an issue to let you know about it, to let you know this is the exactly new version, 1.2.5 in this case from Memdown, that broke your tests, and you should have a look into it. And the cool thing is, not only will it tell you about the break, it will also create another branch which will pin the earlier version to see if your tests pass. So it will tell you, this is not flaky test, the earlier version actually passed. And it gives you a direct link where you can pin this version in your package.json until the maintainer of Memdown fixes the problem. And then if another version comes out and actually fixes your problem again, then it will just inform you, hey, it's all good again, you're good. So when you're lucky, like Brad here, then you just like wake up and see that Greenkeeper basically does self-healing semantic versioning for you. And this is real-time dependency monitoring. All right, so Greenkeeper, just like semantic release, is open source, and you can use it for free for open source. And we also have plans for private repositories and for GitHub Enterprise. Now, no, not yet. What's next? So the things that we learned and now like adapted to the wider NPM ecosystem with semantic release and Greenkeeper, I don't think they are like the solutions, to all the problems that we have. Or all the challenges, I would say, that we have with the modularization in the node ecosystem. But they're kind of like opening the doors. And once you use it, you will get a lot of other ideas that we can do, that we can automate. For example, what NPM has built in for a long, long time is distribution tags, which means you can publish a new version, but people will not get the version automatically because you release it under a next distribution. This is like Chrome, for example. You can have, the stable release channel, and then you have a beta release channel. And right now, we don't take much advantage of it. It's a manual process. You release your next version as a beta version, and then you kindly ask, all your users, hey, can you please try the new version and see if it works? And then when you are confident, then you can just set it to the latest, and then people will get the updates automatically. But with something like Greenkeeper, what we could do is we could integrate it and do it automatically for you. Like you could release, like an next version, and then we could just create these branches and then report back to you like how many people that depend on your code, how many of their tests setups actually broke with your new versions. And nobody would even need to know about it. So this is something that we could do. Another thing is like the backporting of bug fixes that I mentioned. We could basically automate that as well. We can at least try. If you commit a bug fix to 3.00, we can just try to commit that to 2.00, the latest version there, and see if it works. And if it does, why not release a new bug fix version as well with semantic release? Yeah, and there are a lot of more things that we are planning. And I'll be around, so if you have any questions, find me and we can chat. Thank you very much.